Hello and welcome to the sophomore episode of King of Our Nightmares. I'm your host, Jeremy, and with me today is Noah, your other host. We're going to go into the spooky sequel to Carrie, Salem's Lot.
There it is.
I would have mine, but I unfortunately had to move to a new place, so forgive me for the bad audio, as well as not having my book, my 3-in-1 of Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining on me.
I think I can point this out right before we start. I can do this with almost every episode. The German titles. I want to mention.
Let's get
German title for Salems Lot. Brennen muss Salem, which means burn must Salem, which is grammatically incorrect in every language.
I mean, and it spoils.
And it spoils.
All right, Salem's Lot.
I got a couple of versions.
Oh, okay.
And this one.
That looks like the Rocky Horror Picture Show cover.
Yeah, it really does. And this one we need to talk about because this has extra scenes in it.
What?
Yeah, as an extra, it's deleted scenes.
Huh. Okay. I didn't even know that was a thing he did.
Oh, yeah. I think it was something limited, but, it's pretty cool.
Okay, yeah. I'm very curious because the only two times I'm aware of him doing things, well, besides from Dance Macabre, his essays, which change frequently. I don't even know how we're going to review that.
Yeah, that's going to be...
I have a first print of it. And the audiobook's the last printing of it. And I don't really want to read that twice. But anyway, Salem's Lot. What a way to top Carrie. I mean, it didn't take much. Carrie, a fine novel, but a little disjointed, a little funky. And short. This book's not short, but it's not his longest.
Oh, no.
I think it's about I want to say it's about like
500 pages.
Yeah, the audiobook's over 12 hours. I know that. But yeah, it's vampire story. His big vampire story, I should say, because he does tackle vampires every once in a while.
Yeah, a lot in short stories, some of them in novels, and like some Dr. Sleep, you could say they are vampires. He does a little twist.
Yeah, and that actually references Salem's Lot.
Oh yeah, which we should also mention. Salem's Lot, it's like Carrie, the book, doesn't get a lot of references in other King books, but Salem's Lot, it's like that's what he references the most.
And he should. It's a very good book.
Oh yeah.
It's so shocking that he went from Carrie to Salem's Lot, and there isn't a book that's like in between in quality. Because Salem's Lot, it just feels in my opinion, it's the greatest vampire novel ever written.
Oh, I would put it that high.
Yes, I don't care for Bram Stoker's Dracula that much because I'm not a fan of first-person diary entries. Even though Stephen King has done that. In fact, it was a prequel to Salem's Lot that's a lot like that. And The Historian, I will say, is a good novel that deals with vampires. But Salem's Lot, it scared me the first time I read it. It was because it's something I never thought of with vampires, which this is like, it feels like a zombie apocalypse in this small town. Or like, you'll see it, we'll also talk about this in The Stand with Captain Trips, where Stephen King's really good at like some sort of disease or something going through a town, where in The Stand's case, the world, essentially. And he writes it so terrifying because the town itself is a character in Salem's Lot. But let's actually get into the plot here.
Okay, the plot is very simple. We have this author Ben Mears, who used to live in this town called Salem's Lot, and now years later, after his wife passed away in an accident, he returns to Salem's Lot. He meets a young woman named Susan Norton. They start a little relationship, and at the same time, there is a new guy in town. His name is Barlow, and
Kurt
nobody has
Barlow.
ever seen him. Kurt Barlow, yeah. And he moved into the old Marston house, which is this big house towering over the city, which I think there's even a picture of in here. Wait. Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
And he has an assistant called, what's his name?
Straker.
Straker, yeah. And they pretend to be like, they sell like
Antiques.
old stuff.
Antiques and very expensive furniture in this. It's a tiny town.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot like the town I grew up in, which is why I think I like this book so much. It reminds me a lot of where I grew up and the weird things that happen in small towns.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically what we get here, because so these characters move into the city: Ben Mears, Kurt Barlow, and Straker. And soon a lot of bad stuff happens. A child is gone missing. A dog gets killed in the cemetery.
In a very gruesome way. Another child dies.
Mm-hmm.
And but they don't die. Well, the first one dies, and one of the I'm shocked. In a modern Stephen King, he would have lingered on it more. But at the time, I think it was because his children were so young, he didn't do it.
Possible.
But this child's essentially sacrificed.
Yep. Oh,
go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say with the story, then we get a lot of like side stories, I would say, about this town, about the people living in it, before we go into the big plot, when it turns out Barlow, this new guy, is a vampire.
Mm-hmm. A very old one.
Mm-hmm.
Which we don't really get into in this book, but in Dark Tower Wolves of the Kala, we get into the vampire myth, the Stephen King vampire mythos. But that was something. So I read this. This is one of the first Stephen King books I read because I saw the Toby Hooper miniseries, and that series is awful. Maybe one of the worst things Toby Hooper ever directed.
Oh man,
I hated it. It's not as bad as the remake series, though.
Yeah, I have heard that much.
The remake series, the only thing it's got is doing for it is they cast Rutger Hauer as Barlow, and I think that is wonderful casting. But they gave him a soul patch because it was the early 2000s, and he crawls around on the ceiling.
And in the old Toby Hooper series, Barlow looked like
Nosferatu, and it looks stupid, and he doesn't really talk.
Yeah.
So Straker talks for him. What? So, especially some of the early Stephen King adaptations, they just mess with pivotal things to the story. We'll also talk about that with The Shining.
Oh yeah, that's infamous for it.
Yeah. Which is going to be a whole controversial thing when we talk about that. Everyone getting mad. Yeah. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. So a few people kind of band together to fight the vampires, but they don't want to believe it. It's the high school English teacher, his doctor, Ben Mears, and our child protagonist of this book. I keep wanting to call him Jake. It's not
Mark.
about the same age as Jake and
Yeah,
Jack, and just about every child in a Stephen King book.
yeah, he's pretty much the prototype.
Yeah,
Which
he
I want,
is.
yeah, which I wanted to mention with this book. I already said it with like Carrie, like that's like most of the Stephen King cliches we know today are already established in Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
It's also in here. Like we have
Yeah,
again, Mark Petrie is like the prototype. We have the small town that gets like described in detail and then
yeah.
destroyed at the end, which we kind of had in Carrie, but this is way more in detail and
This,
stuff.
yes.
And then we have
Um,
an alcoholic character, which we will get into because that's the best character. And then we have a main character who's an author. And we even have like this author having like a car accident, a motorcycle accident in this case, which is
mhm.
weird because this was
Yeah,
obviously the 70s.
yeah, long before Stephen King's incident. Um, I wanted to point some things out in this because after reading this, I watched a bunch of Stephen King interviews from different decades.
Mhm.
And one of them was after he wrote Insomnia, so in the 90s. And he talks about the sexuality of his early books. And we get it in this. But I think it's done tactfully.
I would
Not
agree.
super tactfully, because it was the 70s. He was very much a product of the sort of counterculture that was going on. Books had really, from what I've heard from people who were really into him in the 70s, it was like a cult following. The Stephen King craze in his heyday. Um, and I don't know. I think now he does grosser sexual things in in like the 2010s work specifically.
Yeah.
So it's so abrasive. This it serves the story fine. He has a line in this that I've always found funny, which is when Ben Mears meets his, well, I'll just call her his girlfriend's dad, and they're talking, and he's like, talks about how you can't really get along with someone when you're deflowering their daughter.
Oh man.
Just find that so to the point. But something I want to bring up is the Marston House.
Mhm.
The Marston House is a place of evil.
And it's
And
basically like again a prototype for The Shining, which I noticed because the way it's described in here, like a house that can like what did he say? Like keep the energy, the bad energy of the bad stuff that happened in there.
yes, it's
That's very
what
much the
some.
plot of The Shining, of the Overlook
Yeah,
at least.
it also reminds me of the house at the. It was either a house or a hotel at the end of Talisman.
Oh yeah, it was an hotel, I think.
Yeah, which minus the spider that calls Jack a thief, that throws a tantrum. that bizarre little tangent. Um, but with the the house is so the thing with the house is that the Marstons had a murder suicide in the house. To I get now you're gonna have to help me with this because this
Mhm.
confused me.
Okay.
Did they do it for Barlow? Or is it because the house itself is evil? And I say this because the short story Jerusalem's Lot exists.
Yes. Okay. So what we know from the book, Hubert Marston was clearly insane, and the book
Mhm,
states like people know he killed his wife in the kitchen.
mhm,
He shot her. What they didn't know, his wife was begging him to shoot her,
mhm.
which is interesting, but it's not expanded upon what it means. And later on, Barlow says he learned about Salem's Lot and this this whole town and stuff, and decided to move there because he was in contact with Hubert Marston.
Mhm.
And this is something I noticed. It mentions when Mark and Susan go into the house, there is a book bound in like leather or stuff, written in Latin. I think that's this book, De Vermis Mysteries, or whatever it's called, from Jerusalem's Lot. It's like
Yes.
this Lovecraftian Necronomicon kind of book. I
Yeah.
think it might be, a little reference, maybe.
Yeah. That. Yeah. Jerusalem's Lot's a great short story. We won't really get into it as well as the other short story that acts as a pseudo sequel to Salem's Lot in this, because they're both a night shift. And
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
be getting into Night Shift in the not too distant, a couple books from now, I do believe.
Yeah.
I think it's post The Stand, though.
No, I think it's before The Stand. It's Salem's Lot, Shining, Rage, Night Shift.
We're getting some comments here that I want to just address for those of you who just listened to the podcast portion. Cody A. Sparks says hello. We say hello back.
Hello.
I speak for Noah now, obviously. Yeah. That was the most pretentious way of saying it. And Small Time joins us and says hello. In the Dark Tower, there is an evil place called the Dutch Hill Mansion. I'm not sure if there is any connection with it here. In the words of Stephen King, all things connect to the beam. But I will say, at this point in Stephen King's writing, the Dark Tower did not connect to anything yet. I don't even think he was writing it yet. Or if he hadn't published it in that magazine.
No, not yet. I don't think.
Cody Sparks asks if we're going to cover Under the Dome again next. No, we're doing these in publication order, so it'll be a little while before we tackle the behemoth that is Under the Dome. So anyway, let's get back into it. Part of my love for this book is the really long chapters that are about the town and breaking up the daily life of the town versus what happens when the vampires start infecting everyone.
Yeah.
Because that's terrifying to me. Because we get not everyone's a good person in this town. We got the woman that beats up the baby.
We got the bus driver, which I want to talk about.
We get the bus driver that hates the kids and accuses them of things and kicks them off his bus. We got one of my favorite characters of all time, the guy who runs the dump.
Yeah.
That shoots the rats. And he's a weird, he's kind of a weird sex pervert.
Mm.
He has a thing, he hates this high school girl because she thinks he's a slut, but he also has a thing for her. Ruthie Crockett's her name. And she has next to no character except for no one likes her.
Yeah.
And we got the guy Noah's age that's sleeping with the dude's wife.
Which leads to a great scene.
Which leads to a great scene that 10 years later it would have been a pervert scene. Actually, not even. The Stand has something similar in it.
Mm.
Yeah. But do we want to just talk about that scene?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Kind of wonderful. So, this is a super digression from the plot, but it's to establish the town. This guy's been sleeping with this dude's wife for a while, and the husband comes home and makes him put the shotgun in his mouth, and so he pisses and shits himself.
Yeah, and then he falls unconscious when he pulls the trigger and it's empty.
Yeah. And then he's one of the ones coaxed by Barlow to become a vampire.
Yeah, to get revenge on this guy.
To get revenge. And that's what Barlow does initially is he turns people that want revenge. And that's how he starts to infect the town. But we haven't even talked about Weasel yet.
Oh,
One of
yeah.
the greatest characters, Weasel, the drunk that lives at so Ben Mears is staying at this boarding house. Eva's. Eva Miller is a widow, and she just has she turned her house into a boarding house, and so it's kind of like a hotel for people. And Ben Mears stays there, and her old fling Weasel lives there, and he's a big alcoholic, but he's like a nice guy, but he's a drunk. And he's just wonderful.
Yeah.
He has a scene where he passes out next to a urinal while a guy's taking a piss.
Yeah, and they have to drag him out and into the car.
Yeah. It's just wonderful. It's just Stephen King wrote himself in as an elderly person if he kept drinking.
Yeah.
Oh, Weasel. But yet you care about all these characters. And so when they get all turned and murdered, then you really care. Even Father Callahan, who, if I have one complaint, it's that Callahan didn't get enough in this book to do.
I agree. Like when he's introduced, he's immediately an interesting character, but then, chapters go by and he's not in there, and then he returns. And he gets like a couple of scenes, but not enough.
He's the Catholic priest, he's who's also an alcoholic, and he's losing his faith in the church. And he ends up having probably the greatest scene of the book.
His fight?
His fight with Barlow.
Which I like because it's like subverting expectations.
Yes, it is this epic thing. And the first time reading it, I'm like, why is this happening now? Because I'm expecting The Exorcist, like this is the climax of the book. Oh no.
Because what you think would happen with the way Callahan's character is like set up, okay, he's a alcoholic priest, he's losing his faith, and now he has to fight against this vampire, and he finds his faith again.
Yes.
And then he defeats the vampire, character arc. Nope.
No.
He gets fucking wrecked.
He gets disgraced, and he has to leave town. He can't even set foot in the church. He's tainted.
Oh yeah, there's the great scene when he tries to open the door to the church, and it just burns his hand.
Mm-hmm. Which, this will be the last time we see Callahan.
He will return in Avengers Infinity War.
Turned to dust.
Yeah.
The end game.
Yeah. We will even see him before the Dark Tower.
Yes, we will.
In a very, let's just say, in a book you would not expect it at all.
Yeah. It's a Bachman, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a Bachman I haven't read.
So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. When we finally get to books I've not actually read.
Yeah.
Because you've read everything, right?
Correct.
Even Gwendy? Especially Gwendy.
Even Gwendy. Just like...
the greatest of all characters.
The weirdest of all trilogies.
I can't wait for Gwendy to show up in Salem's Lot. Gwendy's final task.
No, she goes into space and saves the Dark Tower. This is not even a joke. She's literally going to space in the third book. She also returns to Derry and fights it.
Yeah.
Which is also not a joke. Man.
Yeah, gotta love Gwendy, the greatest of all the characters. Anyway, can we talk about the end of this book?
Sure. Oh, you mean the title?
Yeah. So there's a fire that happened in the 50s, in Salem's Lot. Okay, well, we got to establish, because sometimes it's Salem's Lot and sometimes it's Jerusalem's Lot.
Yeah. So the
Which
full
is fun.
name of the city is Jerusalem's Lot, and they call it Salem's Lot for short, or the Lot.
Yes. Which was very funky. So basically, the people who survive mostly give up on the town. They leave because the town's dead in more ways than one. And Ben, our surviving two characters come and they decide, we're gonna have to smoke these guys out, and they set the town on fire once again. That's how it ends. It's so abrupt.
Yep. Because you expect them to be like vampire hunters, hunt them down maybe. But no, their idea is pretty good. Just like, let's burn it down. This is gonna do our job. Mm-hmm.
So,
which we later learn didn't work perfectly.
Of course, yeah. But that's for a story for another time. So there's been a couple adaptations of Salem's Lot. We've talked about them briefly. Tobe Hooper directed one in the 70s, I want to say.
Yeah, I think it was like shortly after the book came out. I think
it's funky. It's post him doing Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't like it.
I haven't seen it.
I thought you were going to watch that one.
I wanted to. I didn't have the time. I will still look into it. Definitely.
It's
because I think the earlier King adaptations, like even the ones that we are not the biggest fans of, Shining, they still have something good in them. Like they were made by like filmmakers. When you look at some of the King adaptations today, which are mostly garbage, with one or two good ones sprinkled in.
Yeah, because Brian De Palma directed Carrie, the original Carrie. Tobe Hooper directed Salem's Lot, and then we had Stanley Kubrick directed.
And we have David Cronenberg with like Dead Zone, and like George Romero with The Dark Half, and you had like actual filmmakers.
Wait, George Romero directed The Dark Half?
I'm pretty sure he did.
He directed Creepshow.
Yeah.
And John Carpenter directed Christine.
Correct.
Because he needed money.
Yeah.
Because the thing bombed.
Oh, did you know they are currently like in talks for a remake of Christine?
Wait, what is there left to do?
I don't know. I wish they would just adapt like Stephen King books that hadn't been adapted.
Just put the Junkin stuff in. It's about all I can think of. There's a few things, but they were like quirky things in the book that wouldn't work in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like John Carpenter left them out. But that's for another time. Christine, a very peculiar book.
Yeah, but with Salem's Lot, the adaptations, we got the original by Tobe Hooper. It got a sequel, Return to Salem's Lot.
It's bad.
Like most.
It's not as bad as Pet Sematary 2, but it's bad. And then they remade it in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And good cast, I will say. Rob Lowe as Ben Mears. It's interesting for a TV cast. It's a finely acted thing, but it's just crap. The one thing going for it is that Rutger Hauer was the perfect casting for Barlow, in my opinion, and they messed it up because they tried to make it like 13 Ghosts at times. The remake of 13 Ghosts, I should say. And just, no. That was that era, I think. That was the end of that era where they just made a made-for-TV or a mini-series of every Stephen King book they could get their hands on. Yeah. And Stephen King like greenlit all of them, and they were like almost all crap. It's the exception. That's because the acting's good in it. But like you got your Langoliers, you got the remake of The Shining,
You got
Tommy
Golden
Knockers,
Years, Tommy Knockers, Golden Years.
The
Oh, what
Stand.
else? The Stand. Which, oh, I
Um,
want to talk about that adaptation in detail when we do the book, because that's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
oh, it's so corny.
Can I just say it now? There was one scene with like Randall Flagg in the miniseries where he's like destroying a vase, and there's like this pottery break sound effect that's like a cliche, and he's like, "Ah, I hate this thing." It's
So
so
bizarre.
stupid.
Um, Small Time says the CGI in the Langoliers was rough. Yeah. Oh my! I think I laughed out loud when you first see them, which I can't remember what the Langoliers is in.
The short story, it's in
Yeah.
4 Past Midnight.
Okay. Let's see. What else? What else did they do?
They are currently talking about making a mini series out of the short story Jerusalem's Lot.
That's like a one episode thing for Creep Show they could do.
Yeah,
But it's not a morality tale, so it wouldn't quite work.
yeah. I mean, I can see how you maybe could expand it in like a mini series, like let's say 6 episodes or something. But I don't know what
How
they're
do you
planning
get
to do.
like two?
Yeah, you have to invent your own stuff, but I can see how they would take this as a basis, like this Haven TV show, which just used Colorado Kid as like a basis for it, but did
I
its
don't know
own
how
thing.
they got that many seasons out of Colorado Kid, but I don't know. Uh, is that all we got on
For
Salem's
Salem's
Lot?
Lot, did we mention the short story epilogue?
We said
We're gonna review it in detail later, but let's just say it takes place
I.
obviously after the town has been burned down, and some characters arrive in the winter and they are stuck near the city, not in the city, and we just learn, yeah, vampires are still a problem.
Mhm. I mean, I really want to talk about Wolves of the Kala, but we can't. We can't do that here.
Yeah,
That's
it's not the
that's
time.
open. That's like a 3 hour talk. That's a good book.
Yeah,
Salem's Lot, though, it's a solid, like, it's a great. I think it's a great starter Stephen King book,
yeah, you get pretty much everything.
and you don't get all the rapey.
No, not yet.
Not yet. We haven't
That
hit the
comes
80s
later.
yet.
Okay, let me quickly check then with the deleted scenes if we are almost done, because
Yeah. I'm curious because I didn't know this existed.
yeah, I think I only read some of them years ago when I first bought this. I think that was like 2014, 15-ish.
Mhm.
Oh, so it has like little, it says in the chapter Salem's Lot 1, Ben is looking at the Marston house, and then there's like a couple of paragraphs of Ben thinking about it. There is an extra scene in the hospital with like Danny Glick, which is interesting.
This is a real good podcast right here.
Yeah, I
Can you
mean,
imagine the audio of this?
there's
Just the shuffle of pages.
yeah, that's what people want. Then there's a chapter Salem's Lot number 2. Something in between the Callahan segment and the one about Matt, the teacher,
Yeah.
about the city itself. Oh, it goes a little bit more into detail with like, the citizens. A scene with Matt and Dr. Cody. There's a lot of stuff in here.
Oh god, we didn't even talk about what Doctor Cody's death.
Oh yeah, I think that's in here as like an alternative version, but yeah, go ahead.
Where Barlow's hiding in well, actually, I won't spoil that. Just know it's brutal, and shocking. It's very shocking.
It's very abrupt too. Like it's very out of nowhere.
Yes. There's a few deaths in here that are a bit on the shocking side.
Yeah,
But I
because
think oh, go on.
Dr. Cody, he doesn't die because of the vampires in that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say Stephen King did what he set out to do, which was do his take on Dracula and the vampires from the EC comics.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fine work. Any closing thoughts?
I think this book is great. What I especially like, it's not too much. Like, it really takes its time establishing the city before it brings in the vampires. And the vampires are actually like kind of barely in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we mostly get like the people transforming into the vampires when they are sick, and
yes,
can't go into the sunlight, and then only at the end, like the last 100 pages maybe, it really goes into, okay, let's get Barlow, let's finish him off, and then they have to do with the vampires in the city. So I really like it. I think it's a very good book. Definitely better than Carrie, which was already very good, like we said.
Yes.
Yeah, this is pretty much the essential beginner's book. If you are new to Stephen King, you want to check him out. In terms of his old books, like that's a pretty good starting point.
Yes, the golden age of King.
Oh yeah.
We haven't hit the 80s yet. So the 80s has got some good stuff. We start to.
I would say the 90s were the point where it
Well,
went.
the 90s is when the dumpster fire began.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get to that. Anyway, hope you all have a good evening, and we'll be right back with another podcast. You're live streaming with us. Have a good one.
Goodbye.